Okay, so I've now collected everything that I need to stop avoiding getting this started. I want to do this, but it's going to be a little bit of a process, so I've been avoiding getting this started. I've got snacks ready, I've got a tea, so you should probably get a snack and some tea. Okay, so, alright. Okay friends, so for today's video, I am going to be making a bag. I want to do a tote bag, but I don't have my sewing machines back yet, so I'm going to do it by hand. This is my go-to tote bag. I did that hand embroidery. There's a video of it on my channel, but this is my general use everyday bag. It's got one button on it, it's got one strap, and it's just an over-the-shoulder bag, and that's what I tend to use most of the time. And I want to remake it, but I want to remake it sewing it by hand. So, to make a tote bag, the things you're going to need, not too much stuff, to be honest. You need some fabric. I'm going to be using this naturally dyed cotton muslin fabric, and I dyed it with black walnuts, which is kind of cool. Pre-mortared in iron, that's why it's this color. So you're going to need some fabric. A yard should do, so if you need to know how much, about a yard should do. Some trimming, some extra fun stuff, whatever you want to stick on your bag. I haven't decided yet, so I just took out everything so I can show you some of the like cute fun things I could put on. Look at these cute buttons. Those were sent to me by Annette, right? I think it was Annette. Thank you so much for those. But yes, I have stick-on things. I have a tag that I put on everything. It just says handmade by Laura Bickeness. So I will put that on something, somewhere. But yeah, so basically you just need fabric and you need a needle and thread. I'm going to be using embroidery thread, mostly DMC, but a little bit of anchor is in there as well. I'm going to be doing embroidery thread to put it together. And if I need any really strong stitches, I'll use some like sewing machine regular thread. I'm also going to be using a thimble, which there it is, should be around here. A leather thimble, not all the time, but sometimes I'll be using it. And I'm going to be using this very lovely yarn bowl as my scraps, my little garbage can for this project. So, oh, and of course scissors too. And maybe a ruler or something to measure, because I'm going to give you some measurements next. So grab your stuff, make a snack if you're not making it with us, and let's do it. I actually don't know why I started this like it's a tutorial video. It's actually a let's try and figure it out together video, because I haven't done this by hand before. This is my first time. So what I have here is a template I made quite a long time ago. I mean, this is a newer version, but it's the same template for a basic tote bag. You need to cut out either 4 of these or 2 of them if you fold the fabric and have a fold showing up down here. So I already cut mine out, but I'm going to show you anyway. So I cut out 2 of them because mine are attached in the middle. But if you don't have a long piece of fabric, then you can cut them out 4 of them, and that'll be just fine too. Okay, so the measurement for this one is 33 by 40. That's the size of the rectangle you're gonna need. And then we're gonna take out 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter chunks. I listed all the measurements here, and this is kind of what we're aiming to make. I didn't really draw it out in my bullet journal yet because I don't know what we're gonna do. So once it's done, I will draw out my bullet journal spread for this one. But there are the measurements on the screen. So if you wanna make this yourself, pause here, and then you know how to make the template. Okay, moving on. So I did cut out the pieces. I cut out 2 of them because I'm going to have one for the outside fabric and one for the lining. I like for my bags to be lined because it makes it nice. I don't know, I really like it. And so yeah, that's already done. For the strap, I just have a long piece of fabric. I haven't decided how wide I want the strap yet. Do I want it to be an extra wide strap like that, or am I more thinking something kind of like this, or something even thinner maybe? I don't know yet, so I'm not going to cut that until I have most of the bag together. So now that the pieces are cut out, If you've got pins, this is a good time for some pins. I could only find 3, so I'm going to be doing this without pins, but again, I recommend pins. You're going to need your sewing needle, your thimble, and whatever color thread that you want to put your bag together with. That's the next step. Alright, so I've threaded my needle. I'm going to be using some orange embroidery floss. I'm using 2 strands for this part. I'm going to start with the side seams. I'm going to be sewing them together, and I'm going to use an embroidery stitch. Actually, I'm going to do a split back stitch to put this together. So I'm going to start right at the end, and I'm going to make my my seam about 1 centimeter away from the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of extra fun stitch stuff after the fact. So it's going to be easier for me if the seam is a little bit wider. So if you don't want to make any, no, just make it a centimeter. It'll be worth it. Okay, so I've tied my knot, secured my thread, and now what I'm going to do is just stick the needle up through the bottom of the fabric and pull it all the way up. And then I'm going to stab it back down through, halfway through the previous stitch. So halfway through the previous gold line that's already there. And then I'm going to come up again through the fabric about maybe 3 millimeters up. We don't want to be going too far at a time because we want those stitches to be nice and tight. These are the weight bearing stitches. Okay, I'm going to stab back down again halfway through the previous stitch. And now it's starting to look like a full gold line, which is cool. Orange, gold, whatever the color is. And then I'm going to just keep going, stabbing through the middle of the previous stitch and then coming all the way under until we're a couple of millimeters past where we were before. And then we're going to go back again. It's basically just taking 1 step forward, no, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is what this style of stitch is. And it's nice and secure too, which is good. So I'm just going to do that all the way across. I'm going to get a little bit more footage, hopefully some overhead of this so that you can see up close what I'm doing, because I don't know if I'm explaining it properly. But I'm going to do that all the way to the top, this style of embroidery stitch, in order to secure the sides together. So there is the first seam. You can see on the inside, pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the ironing board. I'm going to iron it to one side, pull it nice and flat, and then push it to the side. It doesn't matter which side, so pick a side. And then after you've ironed it over to one side, flip it the other way and the fabric will want to come with it, it's okay. And then we're going to cut one of the pieces of this seam. Oh, jeez. We're going to cut it about half the length that it is. So like that. Oh, now I did it to both sides. You're just going to do it to one side. Oh, that's going to make it really difficult. I'm going to leave that attached. Anyway, yeah, so iron to one side and then cut one piece of fabric about half the width of that. And I'm going to also, at this point, finish doing that same seam again on the other side, and then we'll come back. So the next thing I'll show you after I do this seam, I'll come back and we'll do the iron over cut part. I will do one of them on camera. So I'll be back in a minute when I finish with the seam. Okay, so I did the job. I split back stitched the whole seam together with the embroidery floss, and now I'm going to cut the part that we don't need. So what I want to do is fold over the raw edge and hide the raw edges, and then stitch down that lip or fellet. I'm not like term qualified, but anyway, I'm going to do that to make the seam more durable and so that it won't fray. What I did to help myself out, I just ironed the piece all to one side, and then I folded over the top piece by about half and ironed that down. And now what I'm going to do is go back and cut that other half to about half the height so that this lip can go around it and encase all the raw edges. And then I'm going to just whip stitch all the way around the edge of that seam in order to finish it off. So I'm going to do that now. All right. And then those pieces will fold over like that. And now we're gonna just, actually, I think I'm gonna do a blanket stitch instead. I think that'll look pretty. So I think I'm gonna do a blanket stitch to finish this seam down. So I'm gonna get some different embroidery floss, maybe something kind of white. So I'm just doing some whip stitches around the raw edge where the, oh no, careful. Around the raw edge where the, I guess, the seam, like, fabrics overlap. And that's just, I don't know, pretty much just like doing the knot. And now I'm gonna do blanket stitches all down this way with the top piece folded over. Okay, so taking care to keep that raw edge enclosed, I'm just going to pierce through the bottom layer of fabric and then through the side of the seam, the actual fold. I'm going to go through that with the needle, and then I'm going to take the needle and go under the loop that's created, and that's going to be the blanket stitch I'm using to keep that seam all enclosed. So I'm pricking the bottom, coming back up, and then pricking the fold, coming up through it, and then going underneath the first loop, and there we go. Does that make sense? Let me zoom you in and see if I can, like, I can't explain it well, but maybe if you can see it. Okay, so this would be easy if I had pinned this down. If you are, here, I'll just get a pin. I don't have very many. I don't know where I keep losing them to, but they are missing. Okay, so we're gonna come through the bottom piece of fabric. We're gonna go underneath it, and then we're gonna come back up. But when we come up, we're also gonna go through the fold, and then we can pull the needle up, and there's a loop, and we wanna dive back down through the loop. And there we go. And then you can see the whole seam will end up being enclosed, and you won't have any exposed raw edges. And on the other side of the fabric, it just shows up as like a very faint dashed line, because it's only like the few strands you're getting. You're only grabbing 2 or 3 strands of thread from the fabric, so you're not making a huge mark on the like right side of the fabric. But anyway, I have to do this for all of the seams, so it's going to take me a little bit of time to get through them all. I have 4 of these to do, because there's 2 sides to sew for each piece, and we are doing 1 lining and 1 outer bag fabric. I'm trying to decide if I should put a pocket on it, but like I kind of don't want to. I kind of just want to make it like a very, very basic tote bag, but then everybody needs a pocket, you know? So then I was thinking maybe doing one of those like historical pockets, because this is hand sewn, so it could be fun to do one of those pockets that you like tie around your waist. It's like not attached to the outfit at all, and that would be kind of fun. What do you think? Let me know if you think that's something that's cool in the comments, and if you think that's cool, then maybe I'll make it to go with this pocketless bag. So I'm just gonna zoom through finishing all of these seams, and when all the seams are enclosed and everything is looking really cute, then I will come back and show you what the next step is for this. I'm not gonna call it an easy tote bag, I'm gonna say this handmade tote bag. It's gonna take many hours, so if you're thinking of doing this, just be aware that it's like a time-consuming project. It's definitely fun, but it also takes a long time. Okay, so it's the next day now, and I have finished all 4 of the seams. I folded over the raw edges, and I did a blanket stitch to finish that seam. So now all of my seams, on one side they have one gold line, one white line, and on the other side of that fabric you just see a white dashed line. So now that those tube pieces are sort of put together, the next step is to do these corner pieces. So when the bag is spread like this, if you grab that corner and you grab the other corner and you pull them, they'll go straight together like that. And then that is what we're going to be sewing next. So we're gonna do the exact same thing we did for these ones. We're gonna do, in the gold, I'm gonna do split back stitch all the way down. And then I'm going to iron over, I'm gonna iron it towards the bottom of the bag so that it's less noticeable in the final product. Towards the bottom of the bag, and then I'm going to finish it down by cutting that the seam on one side, folding it over, and then blanket stitching it down. So that is what I'm going to do now. And again, for this part, I'm still only using 2 strands of embroidery floss. So if you have pins, you can pin it at this point. Something that I do sometimes when I'm trying to keep a line straight. So first, this is if I don't have pins, like right now. So I know how big I want that seam to be. Just draw my line. And then I'll just do a running stitch across this, through both pieces. Because it's easier to do a running stitch, it's quick, but then it sets you up, your pieces of fabric are already like stitched down somewhat. It makes it a little bit easier to follow when you're doing your split back stitch. So you don't even have to have a knot at the end for this part. That's a cool other part of that. And the cool thing is that then you don't need a knot at all when you're doing your split back stitch, because you've got this tail woven in all the way across the entire line of stitches. So now that that's there, now I'm going to go back the other way, but I'm going to do split back stitches the other direction. Now I'm just going to do that on all the other ones. So there's 3 more. One on the same bag we're working on, and then 2 on the other bag. So I'm going to get through that, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to do the folding over and stitching down on the corners. Okay, so I've done all of the bottom seams here, and now what I've got to do is cut down one side and then fold the other side over top. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to take off about half of that. I'll just trim that off. And then what I'm going to do, fold that over once and then again. And now I'm going to do the blanket stitch to tack that down so that there's no raw edge there. I've already done it on this side so you can see what it's gonna look like. But I'm gonna do that on all of the other corners now, so it's gonna take a little bit, but it'll be worth it in the end. It makes it look really pretty. Okay, so now our bag pieces, both the lining and the outer piece of the bag, have been sewn, stitched. The seams have been felled down with blanket stitches. Everything is looking good. So that part is now done. What we're going to be doing with these next is we're going to be adding a strap. So we could put these aside because the strap is going to take a little bit of time, just because it's so long. So I've got a rectangle that is 6 inches, oh that's good, 6 inches by 50 inches, or 15 centimeters by 127 centimeters. What I did with my rectangle, I ironed it in half first, and then I took about anywhere from about 1 centimeter to probably 5/8 of an inch, folded it in on both sides just to line it up and make the strap have like a nice width that I think is good for a strap. My regular everyday like go-to bag, this is the strap for that. So it's a little bit wider, but I think that's okay because it's going to be a little thinner. And now what I'm going to do, first I'm going to do some blanket stitches along the outer seam here. And then I'm going to blanket stitch along the seam here, and then I'm going to blanket stitch all the way up. So there's going to be a blanket stitch going all the way around the outer perimeter of this really long rectangle. That will keep all of our raw edges hidden, so they're not going to be ugly. I am going to use an entire embroidery floss width, so that's 6 strands. I'm going to be using 6 strands for this. I'm going to do it in the white or the gray, whatever the color is for the other seams. And from there, I'm going to be doing some decorative stitches in the strap. So I will come back to show you the decorative stitch part. I'm going to just zoom through this outer blanket stitch part now. So if you've got lots of pins, you can go ahead and pin this whole thing down. I don't have any pins right now. I can't find any of them. I don't know why. I feel like I must have put them down somewhere stupid, but I can't find them. Anyway, so I don't have any pins. So I'm just going to be doing it by hoping for the best and trying to line up the folds with where the ironing is that I did. And I'm going to keep my blanket stitches relatively small. Like, I don't want them to be too crazy. Oh, this is not going to be a good needle for this. It's way too bulky. I don't want them to be too crazy far apart, but I also don't want them to be like crazy tiny either. So I'm going to find a happy medium for the stitch length that looks nice, but also is still functional. Okay, so I'm just about done on the strap. I've got the 2 bag pieces already sewn together. The seams are down, felled down, and now what I'm doing is I'm just finishing up on my last row here, doing blanket stitches on the strap. So I've gone around 3 sides of the strap right now, and I'm just finishing up the last side with simple hand embroidery blanket stitches. This side is already attached together. I don't have to sew it together. It's already one, like this is a fold that I'm going over. So it's a little bit easier. There's only 2 layers of fabric for the needle to go through. Along this edge, it was 4 layers of fabric because we had to hide those raw edges as well. So I'm just going to quickly move down the strap, and from there we are going to be attaching the strap to one of the bags. We're only going to be attaching it to one at this point because we want to make sure it's perfectly lined up before we do any more moving forward with the finalization of the bag. I also would like to add a hand embroidered piece onto the bag. I think I'm going to use my handmade owl that I printed a photo out, or I printed something out and traced over it, and then I made it into like a hand embroidered sampler pretty much. It was when I was learning hand embroidery, this owl that you can see underneath, and it was basically how I learned hand embroidery, was just by continuously trying different stitches, and I used that bird as a way to fill it in. So I'm going to use that on this bag because it's kind of cute, and I've just been, again, hoarding it. Why bother? I might as well use some of these weird, fun, pretty little things that I collect in some of my projects. So I want to add that to the bag. I'm also thinking it might be a nice idea to add a pocket. So even though it would have been easier for me to put the pocket on prior to assembling those bag pieces, it's not impossible to put a pocket on after the fact, so I'm going to do that. I think I found some cute fabric to make a pocket with, and I think that might be kind of nice. So we'll see how that goes, but first, like I said, I'm just gonna finish up this strap. All right, so now we're going to, on one of the bags that we've already sewn together, we're going to attach the strap. So that we know we're attaching it to the right part of the bag, we want the bag to be right side out. So you don't want that seam and that felled over edge to be showing. We want the other side that just has that very not offensive dotted line. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get the strap and we're going to center it right on that seam. Just like that. We're going to want to center it. And then I'm going to get a pin. I have one pin, and I'm just going to pin that so that both pieces are pinned together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch across here. We want to stitch this down. We want this strap to become attached to the bag. I'm still going to be using embroidery floss for this. If it's a project that you want it to live forever, I would say maybe use like some strong sewing thread, but this is for demonstration purposes, and also I like how hand embroidery looks, so for me it's good, but if you're doing it for strength and longevity, you can use just regular thread. This just is, it's cuter, that's all. Okay, so what I'm going to do to start, I'm just going to get underneath both pieces of fabric and then come up through all of the fabric, but also through the edge of our strap. Then I'm just going to tie a knot to get myself started. And now I am going to start with some split back stitches. So I'm going to take a step backwards right off of the strap, and then I'm going to come forward underneath the strap. Then I will come through, and then I'm going to take a step backward halfway, and then I'm going to come up a little bit farther ahead in the strap. Then I'll take a step backward. Now we're moving, so I'm going to do it halfway through the previous stitch. That's what we're looking at. And then I'm just going to shorten my stitch up a little bit too. So since we're doing the split back stitch, not just a straight stitch, it might be a little bit difficult to get your needle all the way through the fabric. And that's okay, just wiggle your way through. And I'm just going to do that all the way across. When I get to the end of this row of stitches, what I'm going to do is come back down the same like line, but just move over a stitch. Move over one stitch and then go back down the other way. This is just doubling up the security that you have with these split back stitches to keep your straps extra tight, extra strong whenever you're using the bag. Another thing I'm going to recommend is that you should take your stitches just a little bit off of the actual strap, like have it go onto the bag past the strap, where the strap finishes. Even like a centimeter or two, just something so that the bag is like super strong where that strap attaches. I'm almost at the end, ouch, of my first row. I changed to this purple yarn strand embroidery floss because I think it matches a little bit better. And not that that's entirely what I'm going for or anything, it's just kind of true. There, so I'm going to come up, not on my strap, and then I'm going to take a step back, which will put me back on the strap, and then I'll take my next step off of the strap again. There. And then I'm going to be going back the other way. So for this other way, what am I doing? For this other way of split back stitches, I'm going to zoom in so that you can see. Okay, so I'm going to start by taking a step back because it's a split back stitch. Then I'm going to come up a little bit ahead. And then we'll see a stitch there. And then I'm going to come back down through the middle of that stitch, and I'm going to come up a little bit farther ahead. At this point I am working in the edge of this piece of fabric. I'm working on the actual selvage, so it's a little bit denser of a weave here, which is fine, it's good for a strap. It's just a little bit more difficult for my needle to go through, so if it looks like I'm struggling, that is why. And then I'm going to put the needle down into the previous stitch about halfway through, and then I'm going to have it come forward maybe 1/2 centimeter forward. And then I'll pull it through from the bottom up to the top. Oops. And then we're going to go back down halfway through the previous stitch. Where is my thimble? Alright, and now that I'm finished with that, I'm going to do the exact same thing with the strap to the other side. I'm going to attach it. It's the same strap, so I'm going to be just pulling it over and attaching it. We want the strap to lie flat, so make sure you're attaching it in a way that the strap isn't going to be twisted. Make sure your strap is not twisted when you are attaching it. You'll know real quick. Attach it with a pin and then try and wear the purse as though it's a regular handbag, and if the strap is twisted, you'll know at that point. You can twist it back the other way and then sew it on permanently. You don't want to be sewing your permanent stitches with your strap twisted. I've done that before. It's very stressful. It's very irritating. So to avoid that, just use pins. Use pins to start. And then stitch on the other side, the strap on the other side. And at that time, it's going to be time to attach the embroidery patch to the other bag. And then it's going to be like final stitches, final assembly, which I am very much looking forward to, and I hope you are too, because this is going to be actually a really cute bag. Oh, maybe a pocket too. Okay, embroidery and a pocket. Okay, so now I've got my strap stitched down on both sides with split back stitches, and I did 2 rows of that for the straps. So now that that's done, we need to do the pocket and the applique. So for the pocket, I want to use this fabric. I just think it's cute. It's from a shirt that didn't react well to being washed. It got totally shrunk, and I didn't want to get rid of it because I love the fabric. So I'm going to use that as a pocket, and I think I'm going to use this owl as the applique. It's cute. So that's the plan. So let's do that. For this part though, I think I'm going to stitch the owl down not with embroidery floss. I think I'm going to stitch the owl down with like some sewing thread, because I really just want the owl to like shine. I don't want the outline to be too in your face, I want to say. It's pretty close. I just think it'll be prettier if I do it with sewing thread. If you've got pins, a good idea would be to pin your applique. Put it on there. Okay, so I'm happy with the placement, so I'm just going to stab through the head, just because that's where I'm going to get started on tacking it down, and that way I know where the head is going to be positioned. And I'm going to start with my sewing thread. I'm just going to have it grab through both pieces, the fabric and the embroidered piece. Okay, so I'm going to attach the patch with split back stitches with this sewing thread. It's going to be way finer stitches, so you can do a lot more closer together, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put more of them, just so that it's super well tacked down and it's going to stay there forever. I want it to be super certain. And if you get into your design a little bit, it's not a big deal, and I'm going to show you why, because since the piece of thread is so thin, it just disappears in the large embroidery stitches. So this is going to take some time, if you didn't already guess. So I'm just going to speed through this. I'm going to do this as a time lapse because I can't imagine watching regular speed blanket stitches is going to be very entertaining. Because this is probably, I don't know, I'm going to let you know later how long this took to sew on. But I'm starting at 2:12 p.m. Okay, so I've sewn around this embroidered patch almost all the way, and at some point I must have gotten a little bit off track, because at this point, if I try to finish sewing all the way around, I'm going to end up with part of it having a pucker. Like, it's not going to be totally flat because I've been pulling the fabric along, but I found a solution. So the way this is sitting, this can be a pocket. So I was thinking I'm going to add a little button right here that will do it up to the bag, or like a Velcro or something, and then it'll be like a little hidden pocket. It can hold stuff, because it can hold like a good amount, like a good little pocket. So I think I'm gonna just do a few more stitches at this bottom point to bring it up a little farther, and then I'll treat this outer wing portion as the area we're going to do the button on. But I'm going to also finish all of these edges here, and I'm just going to do that with some embroidery floss and some blanket or whip stitches. But first I'm just going to bring this pocket up just a little higher. I want it to be the same distance from the wing as where I started the stitches on the top. So now I'm just going to go over all of my stitches. I'm going to go all the way back up to where I started, just so that I get 2 rows of stitches on this little pocket, and then I'm going to figure out how to make it like functional, but I think it's a good idea. So once I figure it out, I'll let you know. I'm just going to stitch my way around though, and then I will come back and we'll move on from there. Okay, so I've double stitched over all around the owl applique. I want to have the edge of this pocket space, I want it to be like finished. I don't want it to be a rough raw edge like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, what is this called? It doesn't even say on the container. Oh, seamless binding. Okay, I'm going to take this binding tape. It's from like an old store that closed down somewhere in Montreal, and it's like, I don't know what it's made of. I'm just gonna put it over the edge of the owl like that, and I'm just gonna stitch it down really, really gently on the edges. I'm gonna just do a whip stitch all the way around on the one edge, and then I'm gonna do a whip stitch on the back edge as well. It's gonna take a little bit more time than honestly I would like to spend on it, but I think that it's worth it in the end in order to have like the nice finished look I'm going for. I've also switched to a very little needle. This will make it easier to get through. Okay, it's harder to thread the needle, but it's a lot easier to get through all of the layers. There we go. Okay, and I've left a little spot here, a little hole, because I think that's where I'll put the button, right at that wingtip, and then it'll be held on with the brown edging instead of the actual embroidery. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing all along the back of the embroidered patch. Okay, so what you missed. basically I picked out a little button and I sewed the button on, so now this is kind of like a little pocket. And then I got the other pocket, I lined it up on my bag, and then I stitched it down super, super loosely with just like random stitches. It's not to hold anything in place, it's just to keep it so that while I'm stitching around the pocket, it doesn't move. You could use pins. I don't have pins right now, so this works perfectly well. After I finish sewing the pocket on, which I'm going to do probably with either whip stitches or blanket stitches, I haven't decided yet. After I'm done doing that, I am going to stitch down some of this bias tape again. Bias tape, is that what this is? Anyway, I'm going to stitch it. It's just going to be top stitched on. I don't need to wrap it around the raw edge. I'm just going to top stitch it down on top of the raw edge. And then that will make it look a little bit more finished. And then we'll have like this cute little translucent pocket. After I sew this pocket on, it's time for final assembly. We're actually pretty much at the end after this pocket. So I'm just going to get that started now. And for this part, I'm going to use black thread. Also, just because I want to skip doing too many times back and forth on this, I'm going to use 2 strands of thread. So I'm going to start off at the top up here, and I guess I'm just going to start stitching. I'm going to pull my hook up through, so it's starting with the thread at the bottom. Okay, hold on. Don't be nodding on me already. So actually, yeah, I do think I'm going to do a blanket stitch for this. I think it'll look nice on the reverse side. Not that you see any of these stitches. I'm covering these stitches, and then the back side, which is like the side back here, it isn't going to show ever because we're lining the bag. Basically, I'm doing blanket stitches because I want to. You could do whip stitches, you could do a running stitch if you want. I just think the blanket stitches look so nice and secure that it makes me want to use them for everything. So I'm just going to zoom through this because I'm using the same blanket stitch that I used on the other pocket patch thing. And I will meet you back here once I finish this portion of sewing the pocket on. So this is going to take a little while. When I'm done sewing this portion of the pocket on, then I will get back to you and we will do the edge stitch. Okay, so that pocket is all stitched on now. I'm going to just pull out, I guess I'll cut some of them, pull out these threads because now the pocket is on, so we don't need to have this holding it down anymore. So now you'll be able to actually see what it looks like, which is fun. But next we're going to cover that raw edge of pocket. We don't want that visible because it's not cute. So we're going to cover it with that same bias binding tape fabric stuff. I'm going to get started on one of the edges. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just fold over the first, I don't know, ½ inch, and that will be to make the edge look nice and complete. And then I'm going to start by just stitching this down all the way around. I haven't exactly figured out how I'm going to do that yet, but I'm sure it will work out just fine. And I'm going to switch back into that brown thread, I think. I know these colors don't really match, but I kind of just don't care. So there's that. I'm thinking I might do a running stitch to start, just through the whole thing, and then secure the sides off with whip stitches. I think that will make it easier for myself. It's to just do one row of quick stitches through the whole thing. Alright, so there we go. I'm going to cut a little extra off of here so that I can tuck it under so that it looks nice and pretty as it's done. And now what I'm going to do is stitch the entire thing down onto the bag. So I'm gonna start with the outer side just because it's like gonna be easier for me, I think. And I'm going to just do little itty bitty blanket stitches underneath the bag through the edge stitch thing, whatever I'm calling this thing. What is it called? Bias tape? Binding tape? I can't remember what it's called, but it doesn't matter. I'm stitching that brown folded over ribbon type fabric thing. I'm stitching it to the bag with a blanket stitch, and that is going to secure down on one side, and then once I finish doing it down the outside of the brown tape, I'm going to do it all down the inside so that that pocket, all of the raw edges on the pocket are completely encased inside of this edge tape, and it should make it look really nice. And it'll also add a bunch of sturdiness because there's going to be a lot more thread going through layers of that pocket, so it should be more secure as well. But I'm just gonna blanket stitch all the way around this, and I'll come back to you once I finish the outer side so I can show you how it looks much more cohesive at the end, and then I'll show you as I do the inside. So I'm just finishing up covering the raw edge of the pocket with the bias binding now. I did the entire outside. I'm just finishing off doing the inside. And when I finish doing this blanket stitch on the edge of this bias binding, we're going to be done with the pockets, which is very exciting because there's only one step left. Well, there's kind of one step left, but then there's like finishing steps. So like it looks like there's more than one step, but really it's pretty good. We're pretty close. So I'm just going to finish up with these blanket stitches, and then I will come back here, meet you back here to put the whole thing together. Okay, so we're pretty much done. I sewed in a little tag that says handmade by Lord Dickiness because I think it's cute. And then we've got our embroidered owl stitched on here with the button, and now it's time to put it all together. So leave your bag, the one that you've been stitching stuff on and putting pockets on, leave that one as it is with the seams, with the nice side facing the world. The other one that you've got, hopefully you've made two, what we're gonna do is we're gonna have the ugly side, like the side that we want hidden in the end, like this is the pretty side. We want that ugly side on the outside. So we're gonna put that first bag and the strap all inside of that second bag. And now line up the side seams. So there, that's lined up. If you've got pins, this is a really good time to use them. I'm going to use it on my sides and then line up the other side seam. There we go. So now, doesn't look like much, but what we're going to do is stitch along this edge. We're going to be stitching these two pieces together along this edge. I'm going to be using a split back stitch, but you use whatever you want. I'm going to also be using sewing thread for this one because I want it to be really durable, this part. But what you want to do is make a little section. It doesn't really matter where. I think I'll do mine right here. And you want it to be about 3 or 4 inches long. And just draw a mark at the beginning of that 3 or 4 inches, and then draw a mark at the end of that 3 or 4 inches. And that's just going to be able to remind you to stop stitching there. Stop doing any stitching at that line. And we don't want any stitches in between that line because we need to turn the bag out in the end. So let me get my needle and thread going, and then I'm going to start with my 2 million hours of split back stitches. I'll probably just film the very beginning because I can just imagine the amount of time this is going to take. And I'm gonna do 2 strands. No particular reason, just because. Okay, so something else that you can do is draw a line all the way around so that you're following a good straight like circumference. You want it to be straight. So I'm just gonna get my measuring tape and I'm gonna do a line around. I'm gonna start my back stitches. I'll come show you a little bit in because I just want to get started, get my flow going before I start showing you how they look. So give me a few minutes, I'm going to draw the line, I'm going to do some stitches, and then I'll come back and show you what it's looking like. But if you know how to do stitches, stitch all the way around, give yourself about a 1 inch allowance for your stitches, and just stitch all the way around except for between those 2 points that we drew, about 3-inch space. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, so I got most of the job done without you guys. I'm doing the final little bit now with you so that you can see what I did to put this bag together. So I just did some split back stitches about 1 centimeter away from the line that I drew. I drew a line with a ruler, so I'm just making it a little smaller than that. And now my plan is just to just finish my split back stitches all the way up to that point that we marked at the beginning. And that point is actually going to be where we turn our bag inside out, which is going to be the next step. And it's actually going to come together really fast from here. That's why I'm not doing any time lapse for this end portion, because it's so quick. From this point where I'm going to finish these stitches with split back stitches, the bag is like, it could be done after this, but there's a couple of steps that I want to add in just for finishing to make it a little classier, a little fancier maybe. But yeah, I'm just going to finish through this split back stitch section until we get to that little mark that we made at the beginning. But don't detach your thread here. At this point, don't just keep your thread attached. Hopefully you've got a nice long tail at this point like I do. But if you don't, that's okay. If you've got a short one, then you can like secure off your end and leave it detached. That's all right. But if you've got a long one like me, that's ideal because then you can continue using this thread to finish your project. So I'm just going to do a couple of stitches right on that end space just so that I don't have any weakness at that hole. And then I'm going to just hold on to that needle and I'm going to pull all of the contents of the bag out of that hole. Anything that's in that hole, oh, here's the other needle. I misplaced a needle this morning during the live stream and I just found it. It was stuck into the handle. Okay, we're gonna pull out everything that's inside of that hole and the bag is going to be pulled inside out. Alrighty, so now you've got your outside fabric and your inside fabric. Your inside might come out like this, where it's separate like that. All you've got to do is put the one bag inside of the other. And that's going to make it obvious that it's a bag, first of all. And also, it shows that your bag is fully lined, which is awesome. That means that you could turn it inside out and it's going to work, or you can just know that there's no raw edge seams, just like that. And now we've still got that hole here. Now I'm going to be sealing up that hole. This part is not going to be super structurally strong, so we're going to be doing some extra stitches at the end just to secure everything down and like keep everything extra strong here. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull my seam where I've got that actual stitches working, and then I'm going to just hold the seam just like that, and then I'm going to poke my needle through one piece and then pull it up, and then I'm going to poke the needle through the other piece and pull it up, and I'm just going to do this all the way up just taking a couple of threads from either side for each stitch, and that's going to close up this hole in a really subtle and like quiet way, which is what we want. We don't want it to be like a super obvious seam. We are going to be doing decorative stitches over top, or at least I am. So if you're not doing decorative stitches over top, then make sure you use a matching thread for this part, because you might end up with a visible seam on this little hole. But I'm just gonna sew this seam closed with this stitch all the way across until I have the entire hole stitched up. And from there, I'm going to be switching back into an embroidery needle with some embroidery floss. So stitch up your hole. You can use whip stitches. Honestly, it doesn't really matter if it's totally hidden. I just don't want my seam here to show up very much. I want it to be all about the embroidery stitches, so you can see where. So I'm going into the fold of the seam and coming back up a few threads later and then pulling it out. And then other side, same thing, going into that fold, coming up a few strands later, pulling it out. And I'm just doing that all the way across. So once I've filled this seam all the way, I will meet you back here, and it will be time for some decorative stitches. See you then. There we go. Now we're all the way finished. I'm just gonna put one whip stitch through there. Then I'm going to go through the hole with the needle. I'm just going to pull it out down here. And when I trim it down here, it'll disappear. So now that hole is closed up. Perfect. Next step, I'm going to get a wider needle, like that. Then I'm going to get some embroidery floss. I think what I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to iron this down, just so that it's really easy to actually work with. Be right back. Okay, so I just ironed it so that we have a nice flat edge to work with. And I'm going to use, I guess I will just use the same color that I used on the outside, for the strap, I mean. And I'm going to do blanket stitches again. I'm just going to do them all the way around the top of the bag. That's the plan. All right, and I'm gonna just do that all the way around the entire bag. I'm going to do it off camera because I've already done the blanket stitch on camera, so you know what that one is. And I'm just gonna do it along the top, and then we're gonna see how it's looking, see if it's done, see if it needs anything else, and I'll meet you back here when that's where we're at. It's done, ta-da! I'm just going to probably add more decorative stitches over time onto the straps and onto the bag itself. I left room for this bag to be modified in the future, which is something that I think I'm going to enjoy. I'll probably do some decorative stitches along the top at some point, do a little bit of work on the strap, like I said, but the tote bag itself, the reversible lined tote bag with the embroidered owl pocket and the pocket on the other side is complete. So let me show you some of the after shots. What do you think, friends? I think this bag turned out really well. I really do like it. I hope you like it too. If you did like it, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. Thumbs up the video. It's a great free way for you to show your support for the channel and to help the channel grow. I really do appreciate it. Each and every one of you who hits the like and who comments on the videos and subscribes to the channel or shares the video, all those ways of supporting the channel are greatly appreciated. But that's all I've got for you today, friends. The tote bag is complete. I hope that you make it, and if you use a sewing machine, things are gonna go a lot faster, but you might appreciate it a little bit more if you hand sew it. So give it a shot and let me know what you think. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.